about if we are increasing the energy source of each of those local cells, now when I go to call on those cells to go perform, whether it is in the clinic or whether it is in a weight room or on the field, that extra ATP is going to come in handy for performing whatever it is, Olympic lifting, sprinting, agility work, all those kinds of things are, at least in theory, are going to improve.
Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Hauschildt. I'm a family man, a coach, a wannabe athlete. After earning 3 master's degrees and countless certifications, I've decided that podcasting is how I'm going to continue my education in all things wellness, longevity, and performance. Join me to learn along.
Yeah, so I mean, red light therapy is it's an interesting tool. It's an interesting area of science because it really does cross over a lot of different things. So when you say like could be exercise science, could be strength coaches, athletic trainers, physical therapists, physicians, massage therapy, even like anybody who's really working with the human body is going to find some benefit from red light therapy. And it really comes down to really how it works, right? And so that's where I think sort of the good and the bad, like that, and I don't say the bad, but just sort of the struggle a little bit. And I always tell people when I'm talking about red light therapy that I was, I don't want to say a late adopter, but I was very skeptical up front. Let me just put it that way. It took me a while to just get comfortable with the science and understanding what was going on. And I think the big reason for that for me was just this understanding that it took me a while to understand how one tool can cross all those different barriers, right? And because typically when we hear of something that can do all of the things, that means either A, doesn't do anything really well, or B, it's crap, right? And it's just a fad that's going to go away and it doesn't really amount to much. And I think what really was a turning point for me on red light therapy was when I finally started to dig into the research and start to understand the underlying mechanisms. And so the basic underlying mechanism is when you expose our cells to specific wavelengths of light, red and near infrared light, it stimulates our mitochondria to create more ATP. Obviously, ATP is our basic energy source for our cells. Once we have more ATP, our cells become more efficient and better at what they do. And then they perform at a higher rate. So then it opens up this world where it can apply to a lot of different things because when our local cells do a better job at whatever their job is, then everything improves, right? So if it's an osteoblast, we have improved bone healing. If it's fibroblast, we have improved connective tissue. If it's a brain cell, then our brain functions better. If it's something in the thyroid, our thyroid works better, or recovery is better. Like so, when we think about it through that lens of I'm really just working at a very minute level, down to the cellular level, and improving the way every cell functions, then I think it starts to allow us to wrap our head around the idea that we can use it for acute injuries, chronic injuries, recovery, chronic diseases, bone healing, menstrual cramps, like all of the stuff really does start to improve.
And you're saying that part of that function, it's basically your mitochondria are upregulated. I think the term you shared with me last time was photobiomodulation
photobiomodulation. So that's the scientific term for red light therapy. So, red light therapy at this point has kind of become just a real general, term that a lot of people are throwing around without fully understanding what that really means. And so there's several different terms that you're seeing in the literature, but most of the time you're seeing the term photobiomodulation. So photobiomodulation is really just using light to stimulate our cells to produce more ATP and to be more efficient at what they do. Now, how we accomplish photobiomodulation can happen in a lot of different ways. So the traditional form that's been around 30, 40, 50 years is lasers. And Cold lasers have been used for a long time. The research on them is actually pretty solid. But in 2018, there was a pretty big transition when Michael Hamlin, who has done the majority of the research out there on photobiomodulation, started looking at various forms of light. And he concluded that light is light. And as long as it's the proper wavelengths and the proper intensity, it doesn't matter whether it comes from a laser, an LED bulb, an incandescent bulb, that the body will receive it the same way and the cells will receive it the same way and have the same properties. So that opened up a really big window then for all kinds of different applications.
Yeah, I was doing some a little bit of reading, and I was hearing about all the benefits, and I looked up. I'm familiar with telomeres. Like on the cell, on every cell, they
Okay.
say that there's a telomere that you can measure, and they compare it to the tip of a shoelace, which is called an aglet.
Okay.
That little plastic end of your shoelace.
Sure.
And I found some literature that was pretty convincing that said that they had shown that photobiomodulation will help keep telomeres longer, which is basically making cells younger, because that's what happens as you age. When cells replicate, every time a cell replicates, they say it usually shortens that telomere a little bit. And that's why your older population has more onset of disease and mutation when their cells replicate. But on top of the mitochondria stuff, I was seeing some things and that just were pointing in that direction. So I don't know if you had heard
Yeah.
anything or
Yeah, no, and I haven't thought about it that way. It's an interesting way of putting it. And I don't, and for full disclosure, I'm definitely more of a clinician than I am the true scientist. But there is a really large cascade of events that happens when we expose ourselves to red and near infrared light, and the ATP production is the primary one. But yes, there's all these other things that take place with reactive oxygen species and nitric oxide production, and how the body sort of interacts with those as our free radicals, and so it really kind of becomes I struggle with always the right term with this, but sort of I think of it as kind of pro-inflammatory, meaning positive when we talk about the inflammatory process. So there's times where we need the inflammatory process to get ramped up, right? So think after an acute injury, the traditional thought is we ice it, right? Because that's going to help with swelling and pain control. But we know now through lots of research that ice can actually slow the inflammatory process down, just like NSAIDs do, right? And we have to get through the inflammatory process for tissue healing to take place. If we don't get through the inflammatory process, then tissue never fully heals. So that's why we started to move away from NSAIDs and ice right after acute injuries. Well, red light is being shown to accelerate the inflammatory process in that certain situation. But then we also have times where areas are like chronically inflamed and just like red hot, like, what are we going to do with that? And it actually has an anti-inflammatory effect in that perspective. So it always sort of brings the inflammatory process back to center. That's another kind of part of this cascade of events that takes place. And so if we need more inflammation, it will do that. If we need less inflammation, again, it will do that, because we're essentially making the cells more efficient, better at their job, which is what ultimately results in these positive outcomes.
so if I'm playing basketball and I tweak my knee, whether it's an ACL or whatever, or potential ACL, 10 or 15 years ago, what would you do versus are you using red light therapy for something like that today, or is it just like, I mean, what was it looking like, and now what does it look like?
Yeah, so 10, 15 years ago, we'd have packed that in ice, right? So we'd have packed it in ice. We'd throw an ace wrap on it to compress it, push all that stuff out, keep it out. And we'd have done that for a few days. Some people would have gone, 20 minutes every hour, like just really try to knock all that down. And now the protocol we've gone to with a lot of our athletes at Missouri State University is an acute injury, we might use a little bit of ice initially just for some pain control, 5-10 minutes just to sort of numb the area up. But then I absolutely love red light in that first acute phase, 20 minutes a day, maybe 10 minutes. It kind of depends on the patient and the injury. 10 to 20 minutes is a good amount once a day. And then we can, if we really want to, we can start to mix and match it with some other tools and modalities. So I love using dry needling. I do a lot of dry needling. So needles with acute injuries. So we just use small little 15 mm needles just to pierce the skin and stimulate lymphatic flow. So like my true go-to, if I have our starting quarterback tweak his ankle in a football game, and I know we've got to have him ready to go in a few days, I'm gonna throw 30, 40 needles in that ankle and really get that lymphatic system ramped up. I'm going to put some red light over top of that for 20 minutes. And then once all that is done, we're going to use some kinesiology tape and spread it out over the area to decompress, lower the pressure gradients, and allow that fluid to move as freely as possible. And that has become our protocol today. That's working really, really well. And I'm sure, hopefully 10 years from now, that protocol will change again because we've learned more and we've gotten
Yeah.
smarter. But that's where we land right now as compared to, like you said, 10, 15 years ago, you tweak that knee, we're packing that in ice, throwing an ace wrap on it and calling it good and really staying off of it. Where now we're needles, red light, decompression with tape, and then try to keep that thing moving as much as we can.
But you said you would potentially use ice, but that ice is the ice's only role in the situation today to reduce pain?
In my opinion, yes, that's its best role at this point is just pain reduction. Now, I would also argue if I'm going to use red light, I don't really need the ice because red light has been shown to have a similar effect as ice for pain control. So what a lot of the literature is telling us is it has the upside of ice with regards to pain control, but it doesn't have the downside of the reduction in the inflammatory process. So we get pro healing along with that pain control. But if maybe I don't have my red light with me initially, want to know what to do with it right away in those first, few minutes after an injury, I don't have a problem throwing some ice on it for say 10 minutes just to help calm that thing down, get it under control, numb it up, get a little of that pain under control, and then we go on to some of our other interventions over the next few days. But that is really at this point my primary use for ice, just because I want to keep blood flowing to the area. That's going to bring oxygen, nutrients for that healing process. And we know that ice is a vasorestrictor, so it's going to prevent it, which is why it typically has been used for swelling reduction. But I want to do every single thing I can to optimize wound healing and tissue healing. And I've over the last few years, I've become really big on looking at every possible way we can maximize that. So we have an acute injury. It's like, okay, yes, we have our protocol of needles, red lights, kinesiology tape, but then it's also like, hey, let's look at how our guys are sleeping because sleep, when we're parasympathetic, that's when tissue healing takes place. So we need to have guys getting really good sleep. What's their nutrition look like? We have a nutrition pack we give our athletes after they have surgery, where we've got protein and we've got our reds, which increase blood flow to the area. We've got collagen, which is going to help with a lot of our soft tissue, and then we've got omegas, which are going to help normalize the inflammatory process. And so looking at, okay, what does nutrition look like? What does sleep look like? What is red light? And all these things, we put it together to try to create this little environment or aquarium within the body where maybe any of those on their own only make a 1 or 2 or 3% improvement. But by the time we combine all that, we're talking 10, 15, 20%. Like that's real numbers that are really important in the sports medicine world.
Yeah, that's awesome. So they get like, hey, you're scheduled for surgery tomorrow morning. Here's a gift basket of
Got it.
self-care, high quality nutrition for after your surgery.
We got supplements. It's a supplement company we work with, Titan Nutrition,
Okay.
and university. They provide other supplements for our teams, but from a sports medicine perspective, we have a post-surgery pack that everybody gets. That's all NCAA compliant, and
Yeah.
it's exactly what we do. We have it in a big bag, and we go, here you go. Here's your crutches that you're going to need after surgery. Here's your
Yeah.
supplements you're going to need after surgery. You're going to have surgery tomorrow. We're going to see you the next day and immediately start with all this.
And what you said there was Reds? Is that a supplement or is
Yeah,
that
I'd have to look. I don't remember exactly. It's a valid question. I don't have them with me.
is that
I know Titan, our supplement company, they just call it their red supplement, but I
okay?
know it's kind of, they've got greens and reds, and they're both sort of
Okay.
full
Okay.
superfoods, right? And like
Okay.
there's probably beets in it or whatever, but we choose reds because it tends to promote more blood flow.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for post-surgically.
Okay. Yeah. I think beets are purported to have like what is it? Nitric oxide rich.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So okay.
Yeah,
That's a
so
great.
that's just sort of a sample of kind of, how we do things. But like I said, I've just sort of become enamored in the last few years, like how do we create this awesome healing environment? And so I'm just looking at every little thing we can do for our athletes to create that environment so that way we know that tissue healing is being absolutely prioritized. And even I was talking with our hand surgeon just right before we got on this call because we've got a football player that's having wrist surgery, and typically they would put them in a hard cast, which I can appreciate that for the normal person. I'm asking for a soft cast so I can actually take it off every day, throw some red light over that to help with that optimization of the wound healing, and then we put the soft cast back on because we've got the ability to do that and monitor infection and things like that where the average patient doesn't have all those opportunities. But yeah, again, just looking at how we optimize.
Yeah. I love that. And what a great way to like I think one of the things that we're always trying to do with our younger athletes is to get them to know or learn the things that we know.
Yeah,
And hey, your body's in a state of stress. Nutrition is going to be important. It's so important. We're giving you all this stuff, and now
right.
and then maybe you go through that, and then you're in charge after that. But um,
Yeah.
that's a nice way to connect the
Well,
dots
and
for sure.
no question. And then and there's always an education process with that too, right? I think one of the things that a lot of athletes and going kind of down that rabbit hole of nutrition a little bit post-injury, a lot of them are actually sort of worried about continuing to eat the same amount because they're looking at go, well, I'm not practicing, I'm not lifting as much, I'm not working out as much. I need to maybe cut back on my calories, but on the flip side, your body's in a healing state. It needs that good nutrition and those good sources of protein and in order to optimize that. So I always tell them I actually want them to pretty much stay neutral with their caloric intake post surgery as they did pre-surgery because yes, they're not going to have the same needs as practicing every day, but they're going to have more needs from trying to heal. So it kind of evens out, at least in those first few weeks. I want to make sure they're not restricting their calories because that can definitely play a role in what they're, how they recover.
Yeah, I mean, long term, we see the effects of eating like an athlete who trains 30 hours a week. But yeah, they say that in those times of stress, your metabolism is ramped up trying to take
Yeah,
care of business. So
yeah, no
it's
question.
yeah, I've seen that for sure. Um, let's maybe and we haven't talked about it yet, but all of this equipment is happening under the umbrella right now of a company, Fringe. So whether you want to talk about that for a second, but we've talked about healing and recovery. But you were also telling me about these products, and you were showing me if you want to showcase these right now, and then talk about how you're preparing. You're using red light therapy to prepare for activity as well. And
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no, and so yeah, I'm the sports medicine director for Fringe, and so they've got a number of different Fringe or red light products that are out there. So this is the red light wraps that they've really become the industry leader in, and we're seeing these. They've got a number of different sizes and shapes, and essentially these have a bunch of little LED lights in them, and these are great because we can wrap them right onto the body and put them over a shoulder or a hip or a back or something like that. And I can move around with them. They have Velcro straps that come with them. And so I can kind of move through space and um, maybe I'm, working, uh, trying to do some other things, or maybe I'm just heading into a meeting or I'm doing dishes. I throw my red light wrap on. What a lot of people are also seeing is red light panels. Let me grab this out of the box here quick. It's always a little hard to get the box to open up. But the red light panels were actually popular before the wraps came out. But the panels are great because I can illuminate a whole room, which is great for things like resetting our circadian rhythms, becoming more parasympathetic, again, where a lot of that wound healing happens and our body really recovers well. So we want to be parasympathetic after an intense workout to help us recover for the next day. But these are great too, because I can irradiate the entire front or backside of my body. And then these are also great for, like I said, when I combine it with dry needling, because these are designed to be a few inches away from the skin. So I can shine this on that area of the body while my needles are in if I want to take advantage of multiple mechanisms there. But, you know, and you also see like red light beds, and we don't have any of those. We just feel like uh, their cost benefit ratio is not there, and you have to have a dedicated space, and they're expensive and those kinds of things. But those all kind of lean into the recovery space. One other one that I always do like to point out. So we've got our red light head wrap, which I always put it on. People are like, for real, you have a head wrap, and it does look a little silly, right? I mean, let's just own it, right? Let's be honest. But what's really fascinating is the research that's coming out. There was just another study came out this week, and I'm still waiting for the full text to come out. But looking at concussions, CTE, mild TBIs with red light, and the research is almost all positive on it, and especially chronic CTE, chronic concussions are doing really, really well with red light therapy. And so I think this study, I just looked at the abstract. I was able to read the abstract a couple days ago, but couldn't get into all of their specifics. But I think they had like 17 patients. Actually, I take it back. I think it was 34 patients. They divided them into two groups of 17. One group had placebo, the other group had red light for chronic concussions, and the red light group did significantly better with all kinds of different markers, headaches, fatigue, concussion symptoms. So that's another area that I think is fascinating, that the research is really just starting to increase. There's only 8 or 9 studies right now on brain health with concussions and red light therapy. But back to your other question of things like preparing for activity, right? So if I'm still wearing my therapist hat, not my strength coach hat, but my therapist hat. Like, you go to clinics all over the country, and the first thing they do with patients is they throw a hot pack on somebody, and it feels good, and it gets the tissue warmed up, and we feel a little bit more limber and those kinds of things, which is all great. But I would argue that red light will do that because the near infrared of the diodes that are built into the wraps and the panels are such that they will give off a little bit of heat, so they'll have a warming effect to make it feel good. Any kind of soreness, stiffness will be taken care of by the red light. But then think about, if we are increasing the energy source of each of those local cells, now when I go to call on those cells to go perform, whether it is in the clinic or whether it is in a weight room or on the field, that extra ATP is going to come in handy for performing whatever it is, Olympic lifting, sprinting, agility work, all those kinds of things at least in theory, are going to improve. So we can do it pre-workout as well. Now, I've had some people that work pretty heavily in the red light therapy world that have suggested to me that at some point red light therapy may be considered a strong enough ergogenic aid that it is banned for use. I'm not ready to go there yet. I don't, I think that's, I mean, we're talking like that's down there a ways, and I'm not even sure how you would know it and test for it or anything like that. But there is enough research out there on it that at least have people that are thinking about it and talking about it, how we use this prepare for activity, because if the mitochondria is our powerhouse of our cells, we know it is, and it produces more energy, then it should make us perform at a higher level. So we can definitely use it along those lines as well.
And then kind of going tackle it how you want. Two things I'd love to hear more about is the duration. Can we do too much of it? And then also, can you talk a little bit about wearing clothes, not like the frequencies and how it might affect different parts of your body?
Yeah, so both great questions. Number one is the timing, the dosage. Yes, you can overtreat an area. So and that's kind of another argument I have against the large beds is, you start exposing your entire body to that much red light as I'm laying in there and my entire body's being sort of irradiated or illuminated with red light. You can overstress your cells. And actually make symptoms worse. But the general consensus is 10 to 30-minute treatments. Now, that's a pretty wide range. But typically, what I suggest is you go on the lower end of that range, the more acute an injury is, if we're using it to treat injuries. So 10 to 20 minutes for an acute injury, 20 to 30 minutes for more of a chronic, where we really want to blast that tissue. For recovery, sort of that 20, maybe 30 minutes at most would be ideal for a wrap or a panel, because they're going to be set up with the um, the dosage and intensity are such that that's where they're designed to be. Now, if you're going to get into like a laser, a laser is going to deliver a lot more intense light to a very small focal area. So that laser is going to you only need to go like 30 seconds to 3 minutes with a laser, but you also run the risk that you're going to burn somebody. So the wraps and panels are pretty much harmless. You can, if you're really being kind of crazy over the top, burn somebody, but it's pretty hard to do. So it becomes an unattended tool, right? So athletes can just come in, grab it off the shelf, throw it on, and feel really good as they're getting ready to go out to practice or go to a workout or something like that. Typically, we suggest anywhere from 3 to 7 days per week. I don't suggest it more than once a week or once a day, I mean. Now, I have broken that rule, and I always tell people that we want to be the integrator, not just the operator. Meaning, once you know the rules, then you get to break the rules. So there are times I've broken that rule and treated more than once a day, but we're talking about populations that are young, very healthy, neurologically intact. Their cells are going to really respond well to this. If I get into more adult populations, certainly the elderly, yeah, you want to go like 3 or 4 times a week because you can't actually make their symptoms worse. But kind of same thing there too. Like it's an acute injury, post-op, I treat right away post-op, but I'm not going to do it every single day with a post-op patient in those first couple of weeks. But if it's that patellar tendonitis or Achilles tendonitis, man, I'm blasting that thing as much as I can, 20 to 30 minutes once a day, and I'll go daily if possible. So, but really at the end of the day, what you risk is just you make symptoms a little bit worse. And it's not typically, people talk about some blistering and things like that. I just haven't seen that especially with the wraps. Panels, maybe if you put it directly against the skin when they're designed to be 6 to 12 inches away. But most of the literature that's out there, the vast majority, the 8,600 plus articles that are out there on it, say that there's virtually no downside. It's only positive that comes out of red light therapy. So with that in mind, I mean, I think it's pretty positive compared to a lot of other tools that we use. You had a second question. What was the second question?
Infrared versus near infrared, different frequency. Like, why can't we just go
Sure.
out in
Oh yeah,
this?
yeah, all that
Yeah,
stuff. It's great. Yes.
yeah,
So red versus near infrared. So both red and near infrared have similar properties on the mitochondria and the local cells. So we're talking about the electromagnetic spectrum, and you've got blue light over here, you've got red light over there, and you've got all these other that are even non-visible, right? So blue light we know has a is a neurostimulator. That's what makes us all kind of go crazy these days with all our devices and keeps us up at night because we can't calm down our nervous system. Red light's going to have an opposite effect. It's going to be more of a calming effect on our nervous system. Um, but red is going to be right around 650 nanometers is the recommendation there as the optimal, but anywhere in the 600s. So if you're looking at a red light unit that's out there, red, you want to be in the 600s. Now, red is great because it does work on those local cells, but understand that red does not penetrate very deep. So the 600-ish nanometers, as far as a wavelength, is only going to penetrate, say, 4 to 5 millimeters at best. So it's going to be great for things like wrinkles. It's going to be great for scars, wound healing, collagen production, those kinds of things, but all superficial. Near infrared, now we're moving to the non-visible wavelengths of light. So near infrared is going to be in the 850 range of nanometers. So it's a little bit higher frequency. Um, it's gonna have similar effects on the cells, but it's going to penetrate about twice as deep. So up to 2 inches into the body. So the near infrared is what really gets us down into ligaments, tendons, bones, muscles, those kinds of things. And it's going to allow us to treat those tissues, whether that's recovery or injury or anything like that. So the most important thing we look at when we talk about red light therapy is what is the wavelength. So you really want to have both 600s and 800s that are built in to the unit that you're using. Now, Fringe, ours are designed so each one of these little diodes actually has twice as much near infrared as it does red. So we recognize that these are really designed for uh, going right on the skin and treating a lot of that connective tissue aches and pains. So we want that to be absorbed deep into the skin. So we have 2 parts near infrared, 1 part red. But they all come out at the same time. One thing I always tell people is truthfully, from a sports performance and sports injury perspective, the near infrared is far more important than the red. And I'm not saying that the red doesn't play a role in all the things we're talking about, but the near infrared is really what's vital because we want to get into deeper tissue. But if all we did was create some wraps and panels that were just near infrared light, nobody would use them because you can't see those wavelengths of light and they would think nothing's happening, right? So
yeah.
there is a little bit of that buy-in we have to get from our patients and our athletes where it's vital for them that they at least can see that something's taking place. And so that's why we always use red and near infrared together. The other thing that's always, I think, difficult that people need to be aware of is the intensity. And so the intensity of light is measured in milliwatts per centimeter squared. So that intensity becomes important because you look at marketing materials, some people would say, well, we have the most intense red light unit on the market. I don't actually see that as a good thing. That's a good thing if you really want to overstress your cells and actually cause some damage if you're not careful. Um, so at Fringe, what we have chosen to do is try to mimic the sun, right? So we're a big believer that nature has created this amazing environment for our body, and we need to tap back into that. And unfortunately, because of the evolution of our very comfortable Western culture, 50 years ago, we spent 90% of our time outdoors. Now we spend 10% of our time outdoors. So we're missing out on all those healing properties of the sun. So our goal is to recreate the natural sunlight and harvest harvest that red and near infrared from the sun in similar properties. So sunlight is about 37 milliwatts per centimeter squared. We want to mimic that, and that's what our units are designed to do. But as a range, we recommend somewhere between 5 and 50 milliwatts per centimeter squared. If people are saying their unit's over 100, they're either A, lying to you, or they don't know how to measure it, because it's just, that's really difficult to do. And even if you did, you don't want that unit because it would overstress your cells. So we recommend 5 to 50 watts is the range that you, I'm sorry, 5 to 50 milliwatts per centimeter squared is the range that you end up from an intensity perspective. The tough part is most red light units that are out there they don't disclose what their intensity is. And if they do disclose it, they're probably not measuring it very well because it's hard to measure. Where one of the things I love about Fringe is every single batch that comes out of our factories are independently tested, and we publish that testing of what the nanometers are and what the intensity levels are that come out of that specific batch, and it's posted on our website.
Incredible. See, you can't just go out in the sun, but you need a little something extra. It worked.
Well,
It worked.
I mean, listen, there's tons of healing properties from the sun. You look back, 100 years ago, there was hospitals that actually had sun decks where they would put beds out there and let people lay in the sun because there's healing properties. And I'm fully transparent. Like, I'd love for people to spend more time in the sun. Like, it's summertime, baby. I love going to the lake. Like, I'm on my boat. Like, I think we should. What we have to we have to remember that, of course, is there's also harmful parts of the sun, which is UVA, UVB, or sunburns and cancer, and those are a concern. Although those are also the wavelengths of light we need for vitamin D production. With most of us now are vitamin D deficient because we aren't out in the sun. So I actually love telling people to get on the sun, and I want to, but our society anymore just isn't set up to do that. And so I think that's where red light can at least fill a gap there, where we can't get out in the sun as much as we would like to. And we at least get the healing properties without a lot of the downside of some of those harmful rays.
You were saying that the near infrared penetrates deeper, neighborhood of 2 inches.
Mhm.
Do you have any large athletes that they're missing out on some of the benefits because they're so big? Is there like
Yeah,
a
I mean, I
like
think
a
you could make an argument. You take a 300-pound offensive lineman, and you're trying to treat a hip with a red light, like it's only going to do so much, right? And it is what it is. Um, I'm still probably going to use it over that area to get as much out of as I can, but I don't want to be unrealistic either and say that we're treating something intra-articular there that's getting all the way down to that deep hip socket. Like, let's be realistic on what we're able to do. But then I would also make an argument, if I have a hand injury and I taco shell this thing, I mean, I'm shining through from both sides. I'm getting tons of exposure there. Now, I will also say that a lot of red light researchers will say that there's huge value into just exposing our red blood cells to red light. So if nothing else, they would suggest using a red light on our abdomen and absorbing it through the adipose tissue we have there, because is blood flow through that tissue. And when we expose those red light, or the red blood cells, to the light, it can have a systemic effect on our whole body. In fact, there's been multiple studies that have done with autistic kids that they've shown improvements in their behavior by doing red light over their abdomen. And so I think there's some fascinating things there that aren't necessarily what I would consider sports medicine applications, but some interesting things if we do sort of run into some hiccups of, well, can we really get into that hip or that glute or whatever? Well, maybe we say I can't, but I could still make an argument that there's positive things that could come from exposure to red light therapy in general, as trying to treat more systemically than not using it at all.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think that abdomen exposure. Is that like vagal tone, do you think? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think
yeah.
there's probably several things, right? I think it could be vagal tone. I mean, we know that, a lot of people call the abdomen our second brain, right? So like second to our brain, there's more neurological activity that happens anywhere in the abdomen than anywhere else. So I think one could make the argument that I'm also shining light on the neurological cells and the nervous system that's taking place. That's a huge component of our body in the abdomen, but also exposing a lot of blood cells to the red light, which are going to in turn have a really good systemic effect. So I think you could make an argument it's probably some of both.
That's interesting. How do you, and I can just delete this question if it's a dead end. How do you have any clue how they measure out like the brain activity and the impact on the brain? Like, because I mean, I would love to have something like that for athletes with concussions. I've got young kids at home. They are new to bike riding. They're going to be, especially my son, he's going to be crashing and burning every 10 minutes. How would I know when to put something on somebody's head, or like any more comments on like brain health and how that's
Yeah,
measured?
so it's a fascinating question, and the research is in its infancy on that. So, like I said, I think the study that came out just this week, I want to say, is the ninth study looking at concussions and brain health. Other than like, there's lots of studies with like Parkinson's, MS, dementia, things like that, autism. There's lots of studies in those areas, and not my area of specialty, so I'll stay in my lane here a little bit. But most of the research that's been published on concussions has been case studies or case series. What most of them have looked at is chronic concussions. So I know there was one case series that looked at three different former NFL football players with a suspected CTE and chronic concussion symptoms. And they were using it daily for like a month, 6 weeks. And a lot of it's self-reported, right? But reported that they feel better, their memory is better, they're sleeping better. Um, so I haven't seen a lot of studies that have really gotten down into great objective measures of measuring differences in brain activity or even like functional MRIs. I think that'd be fascinating, right? Like, let's do a functional MRI, see what areas of the brain are activated, and then do 20 minutes of red light and then put them back in and see what changes, right? But I haven't seen any of those studies done yet. The one study that's been done looking at more acute concussions and TBIs was actually done with mice. And they gave mice an acute concussion. And I always say this and kind of like, I mean, I don't know how they do that. I guess they have a little tack hammer or something and give a mouse a concussion. And then they exposed them to red light therapy within the first 60 to 90 minutes after the concussion. And then they measured, however you do that with mice, I'm guessing some sort of a maze or some sort of a task that they gave him, they gave the mice, and they performed better. So that's really the initial studies. No one's out there yet that has been published, at least, has looked at acute concussions in a human population. We are dabbling in it with our athletes here because we can, right? Because I've got a head wrap, and when we get a cheerleader or a football player that sustains a concussion, we're trying to get it onto them within the first 60 to 90 minutes to see how they do. I think the challenge with that, and most of the challenges with the research on that, is just capturing those concussions quickly and being able to deliver the red light quickly. That's the limiting factor there. I think the limiting factor for something like us, which we're not a research entity, of like, how we measure that. How do we know that it's better because of the red light, or that just wasn't the way that they were going to progress with their concussion? And so we're kind of struggling with looking at some of those measurable outcomes. But I will say, we had one cheerleader that we did pretty quickly. I think she was within 24 hours after sustaining a concussion, and we did 20 minutes with a full 100% intensity with the red light wraps. And she actually reported that her symptoms increased a little bit, so they actually got a little worse. Now, was that because we overtreated it, or was that because of that was going to be the natural progression of her concussion anyway? I don't know for sure, but we have backed it down now. So our first few treatments post-concussion, we're really only going 10 minutes at full intensity. And then as they tolerate it well, we're continuing to progress with it. So I can't give you a lot of great insight or research on it other than kind of clinically we're seeing some of these things. But then again, the consensus seems to be both in literature and all the physicians and people I've talked to about the topic is there's not a lot of downside. So let's try it and see how we do. And maybe we stumble upon something that's really cool.
So in the mindset of literature, research, learning more, you mentioned Michael Hamlin earlier. Do you have any other, if somebody is just hearing this stuff and wants to dive in deep, where would you point him towards? Is there an entity
Um,
or
so anything Michael Hamlin puts out, it's great, right? He's got 26 textbooks out on the market, hundreds of articles. There is another really good book. Can't think of who wrote it. Let me look real quick. Um, that's a great entry level. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy, and it is written by Ari Whitten, Whitten. It's it's I want to say maybe a couple hundred pages, but it's my kind of book. There's a lot of room in the margins and fairly big font, and so it's pretty easy to roll through. But he and I want to say it was published. I guess I could see, but it's a few years old now. It's 5, 10 years old now at this point. I don't see when it was published, but um, it's a great place to start because it gives a kind of a 30,000 foot overview, and it does get into specific name brands of panels, and it doesn't talk about about wraps at all. It just looks at panels. But especially the first half of that book, it lays out a really strong case for a lot of different uses for red light therapy. So that's an easy place to start. And then anything Michael Hamlin puts out is going to get a little bit more into the weeds. And really, that's where it's like, hey, I really need to dive in deep. Anything he's published is a great read.
fantastic?
But literally, at the end of the day, like I said, I can look. I haven't looked in the last couple of weeks at our database. Last I think I looked, I think our database was 8,655 articles that are published out on photobiomodulation. So, even because Michael Hamlin's published several hundred, that's still just a small fraction of all the stuff that's out there. So there's tons of good literature to look into if people are wanting to learn more.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Got a few more questions to go, but anything else on red light therapy that I didn't ask or that you want to hit?
No, I don't think so.
That's a good,
I think just the exciting part is just looking at all the various uses and applications, and then we're going to see people being more and more creative with the different types and ways we can deliver it. I mean, Fringe now has a pelvic wand red light unit, which again is not in my category because it's more like women's pelvic health. But you start looking at things like pelvic pain, endometriosis, post childbirth, all these kinds of things that a lot of women battle. There's red light units for that specifically now. And then we've got the panels and we've got the wraps that are more sports medicine and the head wrap for all kinds of different things. I think we're going to continue to see the evolution of technology really working to help us deliver red light therapy more efficiently, easier, more cost effective. Um, and I think sky's going to be the limit on that. So I think we're just kind of scratching the surface of what we're going to be able to do, and hopefully 10 years from now, if we record another one of these, we're going to be talking about lots of other cool applications.
yeah, I'll hold you to that.
Yeah,
Um, this is the Winning Wellness Podcast, and I kind of have like a double-sided sword there is that some people just need to get healthy and win their wellness. Other people are in pretty good physical, mental health, and they can compete for the championship or a win or a
Sure.
starting spot or whatever it is. So you can tackle it however you want. Um, what's the number one thing that you are telling people or think that people should be doing to win their wellness or to win well?
Uh, no question, hands down, the number one thing we all can and need to be doing is just moving more often. Like, and like the old Gray Cook thing of like move well, move often in that order. Like there's no replacement for movement. I am a firm believer that movement is the key to all the things that ail us in this world. And the reason why we have so much chronic illness and issues in our culture is because, let's be honest, we're kind of fat and lazy. And some of us aren't fat and lazy, but if you compare us to human beings over thousands of years, we're pretty fat and lazy, right? We're not out foraging for our food every day. And as much as I love all these fancy tools and all the cool stuff, and I can sit here and geek out over the science, the reality is all of this is just a means to getting back to moving well. And you'll never ever hear me say, "Hey, just tape that and call it good," or just throw a red light and call it good, or needle it. Like I love all these tools, and I've worked with all these amazing companies, but all of those are just a way to expedite the process to get back to moving better and moving more efficiently. So the number one thing that everybody can do is move well and move often. And I say that for my athletes. I say that for myself. I say that my parents are in their mid 70s, and my mom has battled weight issues her entire life, and she's always coming back to me like, oh, maybe I should buy this or try this supplement or this medication. And my answer is always back to her is like, hey, let's start by going for a walk, right? Like, let's just get out and move. And I love supplements too, right? But the second would be eating well, right? So we need to move a lot and we need to eat well. And if we do those two things, our odds of being really healthy for long periods of time are crazy, crazy good. And um, so I think supplements are good, but they're a supplement, right? And they're supposed to fill the gaps in between our good sources of food. And I'm not a guy that's like, oh, we have to eat everything organic and I only do this kind of meat or that kind of vegetable. Like, I mean, I know, yes, there's issues with our food sources, but let's start with just eating clean as well as clean as we can, given all the parameters that we all have. But more than anything, just move. And if we move a lot, man, good things are gonna happen. So that is my number one. I don't think that will change when we record this again 10 years from now. I think that's just a tried and true fact. We have to move all the time.
Yeah. Well said.
And let me say something too. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things I don't want to get too much on a soapbox, but like we're not even just talking about cardiovascular health, right? We're not just talking about um uh strength and resiliency. We're talking about brain health, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about longevity. I mean, there's a study, a 2012 study came out of Brazil. It looked at your ability to go from a standing position to seated on the floor back to standing using as little support as possible from a knee or a hand or whatever. Like your ability to score well on that activity has a profound effect on your death rate over the next 6 years. And there was a study came out 3 or 4 years ago out of UK, looked at 80,000 people and they looked at their daily step count and their likelihood of being diagnosed with dementia. If they averaged, I think it was like 9,936 steps a day, their odds of being diagnosed with dementia were like crazy low. But the people that were like 3 or 4,000 steps a day, their rates of dementia and brain health issues was through the roof. And so it's hard for us to kind of figure out and draw the lines between all those different things. But just moving a lot has a lot to do with our brain health, our cognition, our memory. And so there's just so many different reasons we have to move and move and move and keep moving and don't
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. And we have the hardware of cavemen, and we're living in this pretend indoor world, and all the things you're talking about, whether it's light exposure, the food, the motion, the mental health benefits of just being outside. Yeah, we're not living the lives we were designed to live.
No, no question,
Yeah.
not at all. Not at all. And even, you go to third world countries. You know, you and I were talking about, you know, you're going to be traveling to other parts of the world. Like you go to a lot of parts of the world, like men and women that are 80 years old hang out in a deep squat position all day long because that's just the way their lifestyle is, right? And I've done this. Like this is always a crazy conversation, but I've been in Ethiopia, and one time I was eating dinner with our driver from Ethiopia, and I mentioned something about a drive-through, and he was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You know, like a drive-through, you go get your food." And he's like, "I have no clue what you're saying." And it dawned on me that they don't exist in other countries.
Yeah.
And then I was like, man, I started unpacking this thing in my own mind. I'm like, in America, we'll do anything we can to avoid getting out of the car, right? We get our food, we get our groceries, we can get our laundry done, we go to the pharmacy, like we will fight to never get out of our car. And then we go pay somebody at 80 or 100 bucks a month to go walk on a treadmill at a gym that takes us absolutely nowhere. And it's like that's the world we live in. But when you go to other parts of the world, they look at you like you're absolutely crazy. Like America is this, like we've all lost our minds, and maybe we have, right? But we have to, like, that's the world we have, so we're going to fight and work within it. But um yeah, other parts of the world don't face the same challenges. And now one could argue we have a lot of really positive things that come out of this comfortable lifestyle, but movement's not one of them, in my opinion.
Yeah. And being comfortable is awesome, but short term
Right.
benefits. Yeah.
I see, like Mitch, you're getting me on off of these tangents now.
Yeah.
Like you and I, this is us speaking together. But like, I actually said this morning to one of my coworkers. We were actually talking about counseling, right? Like mental health counseling, and how, you know what? If you've ever done it, it's not very much fun in the moment, but you know at the end of the day you need it, and it's going to, because you're going to pull up these motions that nobody wants to deal with, you know. But also, like, think about our athletes, how we train them. The reality is there's a lot of people in our world that don't want to be uncomfortable, but that is our greatest opportunity for growth, right? And so, and we can define discomfort as a million different ways. That could be physical discomfort of going for a run or going for, you know, going out on our bike, or it could be the mental discomfort of going through counseling, or the physical discomfort of not, you know, restraining from eating that third piece of cake or drinking that sixth beer or whatever it is, right? Like, but that discomfort is what allows us to grow. And you know, I do feel like in a lot of ways we're surrounded in this world, and I'm not perfect by any means. I'm not like, I am preaching to myself when I say this. Like, we have to be okay with being uncomfortable, because that's where we get better, and that's what really stimulates growth in a million different ways. However, we want to define what our definition of growth is. It usually happens through times of discomfort.
Yeah. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you.
Right. No
And
question.
even earlier, I mowed the lawn and I went to grab my headphones. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it quietly. And like, but there's just so many opportunities. You don't have to ever think your own thoughts. You can listen to stuff all day long. And I went to grab my headphones and I just said, no, I'm just gonna have some quiet time. And the fact that that is like a victory for the moment is just it is laughable. But
I
you
love
know,
it though, right? Like
yeah,
you're dead on. And I will never go mow the lawn or go for a walk or run without my headphones. And you're exactly right. Like, we need times of just silence and quiet, and where we're not always plugged into things, but we don't do it. And you know, you bring that up too. Uh well, man, it's been more than a few years ago now, but I decided a few years back to try a couple sprint triathlons. And so I got in the pool and I was swimming. And the one thing that is still stuck with me about my time training in the pool was there's a lot of quiet time in your own thoughts. And I actually gained a tremendous amount of respect for our swimmers, because they spend 2, 3, 4 hours every day, depending on the time of year and how often, whether it's 2 days or whatever it is in the pool, they spend a tremendous amount of time where all they're doing is thinking, because they can't hear a lot of what's going on around them. Because when you're underwater, you're just stuck with your own thoughts. And that was a real eye opener for me. And So you saying you went out and mowed with just some peace and quiet and your own thoughts, man, props to you because I agree with all of that.
Yeah, it's we just have to find ways to break to if ever do figure out what everybody else is doing and just do something different. It's pretty much the probably the equation.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start anyway.
Yeah, nice. Hey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you getting on here and schooling me and everybody else as well. Contact wise, if someone wants to get a hold of you, is there a good avenue for that?
Yeah, and first of all, before I get to that, thank you for the opportunity. And I love these conversations. These are things I look forward to, and I love talking shop and sharing ideas and finding like-minded individuals. So this is fun. Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is email, just Mitch, Mitch, at fringeheals.com. So FRINGE, heals, HEALS.com. And that's my Fringe email. But you can also look me up at Missouri State, where I'm the rehab coordinator for the athletic department, and I'm going to be on a lot of sidelines of games and things like that, trying to keep our guys on the field. So I can be found a lot of different ways, but people can always reach out any questions that come up, or they want to know anything more about red light or even non-red light. Doesn't matter. Just shoot me an email. I love talking shop, and anything I can do to help people, I'm always interested in doing.
Nice. And then last thing before we hop off, what's the next thing you're going to do to challenge yourself?
Ooh, that's a great question. Because I've actually been thinking about that. So couple of thoughts. I typically in July every year there's a 7-day bike ride that goes across to Iowa. It's usually 400 to 500 miles. I've done that 10 times now. Last year I didn't do it for the first time in a long time. I'm not going to do it again this year. That's usually kind of my thing that like I make sure I really train hard for so I can have a fun week with my friends. But my kids' schedule is just all over the place. So I haven't I decided those last couple of years to take some time off. About 3 years ago, I ran the New York City Half Marathon, and I got done with it and said, okay, I did that. I don't think I'll do it again. But I've kind of been thinking lately that maybe it's in March, maybe March 2026, I do that. I'm not a runner. I'm a guy who runs, but talk about being uncomfortable. Uh, that's a lot for me. I was a former offensive lineman. It's a time of discomfort, but also a lot of time with my own thoughts. And so that's kind of where I'm leaning is maybe I sign up for that again in next March. I run another half, but I don't know. I do think it's a valid question. I try at least once a year to find something to challenge myself, but I don't have something scheduled just this moment. But I appreciate you asking because it stimulates me to want to get something on the books because I think it's important that we do those things.
Yeah, got to make those little milestones along the way.
Yeah, there's actually a really good book also if people are looking for something called Comfort Crisis and Comfort Crisis, and it talks about how comfortable we are, and it actually challenges you once a year, and then it actually gives you specific rules. Like you can't do something that's gonna, where you might die, right? Like safety is important, right? So don't do something uncomfortable for the sake of being uncomfortable, which is going to make you die. But finding something at least once a year that's going to make you uncomfortable stimulates a lot of growth just in all aspects of your life. So that's another book I really like, and I would encourage people to look at. Um, but I have historically tried to find some, like once a year, find something that I know is going to stretch me a little physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever. I just need to get to scheduling something, but it's good stuff. I love it.
Nice. Awesome. Well, have fun at your race in New York City.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
Definitely something I'm looking at. So
awesome. Great. Well, we'll be in touch for all sorts of reasons, including
yeah, absolutely.
trying to get some fringe products in over at the university.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like I said before, if there's anything I can do to help and people want to ask questions or dip into a class for a little while and talk about some of this stuff, I'm happy to do it.
amazing. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah. All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Winning Wellness Podcast. Please keep in mind that all views expressed within the show are not a reflection of any universities or organizations that I may be affiliated with. If you have any questions or suggestions for future shows, please reach out through Instagram, where I can be found with the title name of Mitch Schwartzman.